get up.
Most designs that I see out there are pretty boring. That's not necessarily bad when you look deeper into the details, because a lot of UI is kind of supposed to be boring. But everything starts to look the same. People use the same presentation methods, the same mockups from free websites, and the same frame sizes. So yeah, all those portfolios are basically like one big boring portfolio. If someone's cocky, they might buy a mockup set, a paid one, and then be a little bit more unique. But it's not enough. You need a personal brand and an insane level of consistency, so people first of all instantly recognize when some piece of work is yours, and also yeah, you're just not boring. Let's start by creating your avatar or profile picture. One cool way to do it is to use a backdrop color or gradient, or just a couple of shapes behind you on a simple color background. Something that's inherently yours and matches your brand. And when this is done, the logical next step is your own mockups. This video is a bonus section of my Don't Be Boring course, link to the full one in the description. So let's dive into Spline and create a mockup set that matches your avatar. Okay, this is gonna be a very beginner friendly way to create your own mockups. I'm gonna go in Spline into the new file, and I'm gonna remove the starting point over here too. So let's call this our mockup, and what we want to do is basically like in Figma or in Sketch, just make sure that you reset the camera so it's basically all in the middle like this. Create a new rectangle, and we want this rectangle to be the size of the screen, which is 375 by 812. So this is the aspect ratio of a standard phone screen. So let's round the corners a little bit. All right, perfect. Maybe let's round them to 32. And now extrusion is a way to make this thin rectangle be a little bit thicker. So I'm just gonna extrude it to 2 points. And then when you hold the Alt or Option key and click and drag, you'll see that it's now a tiny bit thicker. And if you change the extrusion value, selecting it now, if you change the value, it's just gonna be a lot thicker, but the screen doesn't really need to be that thick, so this is perfect. So I'm gonna reset it again, and I'm gonna copy this and paste it again. And the first one is gonna be called screen. Now the second one is going to be the phone itself. So of course you need to pick a color. For now, I'm gonna pick some color that is visible, and obviously it kind of overlaps our other element. So what we want to do is holding the Option key and clicking, kind of move it diagonally like that a little bit, and then holding the Shift key and this little arrow here, move this back. As you can see, it just moves in one direction, and this is what we want. So just move this back, not too far back, but it doesn't matter. We're gonna bring this closer. Now reset again, and now you see those little handles here. So holding the Alt key, drag them both to both sides. We want pretty thin bezels because it's a modern device, and we want some thin bezels on the top part as well. So of course the main difference here is that we want to slightly round the corners a little bit more, just so they match this main device part. Okay, so now if you select this element, let's extrude it to maybe 20 or a little more, maybe 32. And now holding the Shift key again, move it, but just move it so until the first pixel of the screen starts to show. So this screen part is actually pretty important, but obviously we need to do a couple of things first so it looks more realistic. So I'm gonna reset the camera again, and let's switch to a top view camera. And I'm gonna create a new rectangle in the top view, like this, and you can use the mouse wheel to zoom in. We can now round the corners and then extrude it. And if you're not sure what happened, you can just use the Alt key and kind of drag it down like this, and you see that we basically have this little shape. So we actually want this shape to be used for a couple of things. So I'm just gonna duplicate it again and drag the copy of it down towards here. And holding the spacebar, I'm just gonna move this up, zoom in with the mouse wheel, then spacebar, hold this up again, place it in the middle of the phone, and let's look at the bottom view, which is this one. All right, and now you can use this part to kind of move it into place. Perfect. Now let's reset the view again and see how deep it goes into the phone. We want it pretty deep. Okay, now let's select the phone again and let's actually make this phone body. And this is going to be our USB port. So select the new rectangle and the phone body on the layer list, just the two, and just click this icon in the operations here. And what we should have now when you start to rotate is a hole. But let's go back one point. So before we actually made that hole. Because what I found out is actually a lot easier to have something to fill those holes with. So I'm just gonna duplicate it again, the same rectangle, and I'm gonna pick just one of them. So the other one is in the same spot. I can actually hide it for now. All right, and let's do it again. So select that rectangle here at the bottom and then select the phone body, make this hole. Okay, we have the hole. So now let's open this up and bring it back like this. And what we want to do is select it, go into material and to color, and basically make it black. Okay, you can switch the camera a little bit and then holding the shift key, just push it up. We want to push it up to a point where it shows that there is a hole, but it's still a little bit visible, like this. Because see what happens if I turn it off. It just looks like this little blue hole. It doesn't really look nice. It's a lot better and a lot more natural if it's kind of black in there. Okay, perfect. So remember to always reset the view before you start drawing or moving anything. So I'm gonna duplicate this part again. Move it up. Move it to here. Because this is roughly where our power button is gonna be. Just zoom in a little bit. And now the tricky part is that you only use the arrows. If you start moving it around like that, you can go wrong. So just use the arrows with the shift key. And you can also just kind of use the cameras to be in the fully top view. All right, and I'm gonna move the button to here. Now holding that shift key and spacebar, moving it up. Remember that the arrows are different sizes depending on the perspective. But okay, we have ourselves a button on the top of the device. If you want it, this doesn't have to be on the top of the device. We can rotate it 90 degrees and move it to the side of the device. But then remember to reset again and move it to here. And then I'm gonna zoom in, use the spacebar to move it, and then we can just drag the size because the power button is usually a little bit bigger. And in the iPhone, it's actually on the right side. So if you want to kind of emulate an iPhone, you can just kind of move it over here. And since we're in already the right spot, we can just copy and paste this and move it to the other side. Just make sure that it's roughly sticking the same amount. And there are the volume buttons that are a little bit smaller. So just make it smaller like this, copy and paste, then holding the shift key, just move the copy down a little bit. And if you want, you can try to make the power button as tall as both of the other buttons combined. That can look pretty good. All right, so the top is completely clear. Okay, now we're gonna go to this side over here and copy and paste this again. And this time move it up the third time. Okay, like this. And this is going to be our mute switch, but I want to copy and paste it so we have two of them. that first one or the second one, we can just hide it clicking on the eye. And then basically I'm gonna use this one. But what we want to do is make sure that this mute switch is on a higher level than the Boolean operation that we used to kind of make the hole for the USB port. So select that phone body with that hole already in it, because this is how it looks like, and the mute switch. And let's do that same thing. And sometimes it inherits the color. In that case, that's not a problem. You just go back in and change the color again, or change the color to anything you want, because we're going to be playing with colors a little bit later. All right, let's place this back in here. And for now, I'm going to pick some crazy color here and drop it inside like this. Okay, maybe this is a little bit too crazy. Maybe let's go with something like this. Okay, and then duplicate this again. Drag this out a tiny bit. Now reset the camera, zoom in and move it. And we want it to be half its current height. So maybe something like this. And basically what happened here is that I didn't copy and paste it. So one more time. So copy, paste. Okay, we have two of those now. So let's make the other one a different color. And what we want is to have a view in which we can just shrink it. So maybe even from this side, just shrink it to be roughly half. All right, now select the purple one in our case and then kind of drag it down. So this is a mute switch, it's indented. And now switch to this camera view. Let's zoom in again, use the spacebar to drag it. And then on the right arrow, our little switch should be sticking out roughly as much as these elements. Of course, it doesn't have to be sticking out like that. It can be flush like in the iPhone, but in this case, I think it's actually gonna work well. So I'm gonna make this white so it's more visible. So we have a switch basically inside here. Okay, perfect. So we have ourselves our phone, but obviously, it still needs a little bit of tweaking. So what I'm gonna do is gonna select the buttons, reset it, and move them a tiny bit down like this. So it's more reachable by one hand on the phone. But obviously now we have our hole in the phone completely destroyed. So let's go into this part as well, which is the Boolean operation. It's kind of like in the vector tools. Basically, there's groups within groups and something happens to change stuff. So basically, we just want to move this down inside that group. And that means that the hole is actually in the right spot. This is looking pretty good. So we want one more thing here really, and then we're gonna play with the materials and all that other cool stuff. Or actually, we want a couple more things. We want a microphone grill here at the bottom, and we want a speaker, and also we probably want a little bit of a speaker somewhere at the top here. So what we might actually do is increase the top height a tiny bit, but then to match it, we probably should also increase the bottom height, or just increase the top a little more and then move the display up. Okay, so maybe let's grab this element that we have here, and those little bendy lines here, when you click them, you can rotate. Just make sure it's 90 degrees. Now go back to reset, move it up here to the middle, and maybe we need even more space vertically, because yeah, sometimes it just is a little bit of tweaking to get it fully right, but we definitely want the same amount of space on the top and bottom. Okay, now I'm gonna zoom in again, grab this and this with the arrow, just move it to the middle here. And this is gonna be doing the exact same stuff that we've been doing before. So basically we're gonna be making a hole in the phone. So this is gonna be our speaker, and I'm gonna move it above the phone here and copy and paste it. So we have two. Now let's hide the one, select the phone body, which is all the Boolean groups, and the speaker cutout, and then make a hole. And as you can see, the hole is too big because it's basically going right through. So this is not what we want. What we want is to make this shorter. And if you just select this little dot on the blue line or blue arrow, you can do this and then just drag the arrow out like this. And let's do this again. Select both the boolean and the speaker, then make a hole. And yes, this is what we wanted. We want just a small speaker here. You can add like a front-facing camera here as well, or maybe in the display, like whatever you want. So now I'm gonna turn on that second speaker part, but of course we also need to shrink it quite significantly. All right. And for now, I'm gonna just set it to black. And let's just set this entire thing. All right, so the next step is the speaker grills. So for that, I'm gonna grab our mute switch, just move it down because it's roughly already in the right spot. It's just a little bit too thick and it's not rotated the right way. So just holding the shift key, let's rotate it 90 degrees like this. Perfect. So in this view, what we basically want to do is to distribute the holes. So just gonna copy it 3 times. Okay, and you can select all 3 of those. And then try to position them roughly in the middle from the USB port to the edge of the phone. You can also make them narrower like the USB port and then in the middle. Then duplicate this entire group and place them on the other side like this. And if this works, then of course both groups also need to be duplicated again. But this time, of course, let's hide the second one, the duplicated one. Duplicate this one, hide it. Okay. And now we have those mute switches. We want to place them all outside of the group, but kind of above our Boolean part because we're going to be removing stuff again. And this not hidden group as well, like this. Okay, and then I switch the view and using the arrow, I'm just gonna kind of point them inside like this. It doesn't matter how deep this goes really, because those speaker grills are gonna be pretty shallow. So just selecting the Boolean group and then all those 6 mute prongs that we have here and making holes again. Beautiful. So now let's enable those mute groups that we disabled. But what we want to do is just select all of them and change their color to black. And same here, just make sure you don't move it. If you move it, undo quickly. Okay. Now you can select both of them, reset it, and then kind of push it up like this. So there is a little bit of empty space there, like that. Okay, so now let's make a proper display. So the proper display is gonna start by moving the display above the Boolean group, duplicating it one more time, hiding one, and then extruding this a little more, maybe 5 points, and just see in which direction it went. Because we want it to be possible to also cut out a little hole in the actual main display. All right, let's make that hole. Okay, and now we have this little indentation, which is gonna work great. So now let's turn on our screen. Okay, and now what you can do is zoom in a little bit and move it almost flush. Okay, that looks good. So selecting that screen, I'm gonna go into materials and I'm gonna add glass. But this glass is going to be maybe 20% transparent, maybe even 10. And then go into lighting, change this to physical, gonna make this look a little bit more natural. And you can increase the reflectivity if you want, then it's gonna reflect light a little bit more. I'm gonna slightly increase it. The metalness can be maybe 0.5 and roughness 0.2. Okay, so we do have a display now. We have the buttons, we have the mute switch. But with the mute switch, I see that we don't really have this hole inside there, or at least not visible. So I'm just gonna go into the side view again, move this up and move this up. And just make sure that it's filled. And of course, this one can now be black. Like this is our mute switch, and this mute switch could be here. Remember, if you're moving with those arrows, it doesn't matter the perspective you're in. Just make sure you're moving it right. Okay. This is looking good. But of course, this phone is a pretty ugly color. So what we can do now is to change the color. And I'm gonna change it to black or almost black like this, because this is a more natural phone color. But of course, we're not gonna just keep it that way, don't worry. What we want to do here is to add something called matte cap. And that basically creates like a material part. And there are many materials that you can pick from. Most of them won't really fit a phone like these, unless you want a wooden phone, but I would advise against it really. And the ones that work here pretty well are usually the more natural looking ones. So I'm gonna start with this one first, or maybe this one. Because as you can see, when you start moving the camera, this kind of starts to look like a phone with reflecting light in a metal-like approach, which is pretty good, which is kind of what we want, but not completely. So the next thing, let's say we picked the material. I'm gonna go right here, right click, copy the material, and I'm gonna paste it onto the buttons. So this is gonna be paste material. And as you can see, the button now is looking more like a metal button. So paste material, and same with the mute switch. And then the on-off switch. So as you move the camera, you see how light is bouncing off the device in those nice ways. There is the speaker grills and everything. It's already looking nice. And you can grab the light and use the same principle to kind of move it a little bit away from the phone. Perfect. Now let's reset the perspective. Here's our device. It doesn't really look that impressive, but don't worry. Let's zoom out a little bit, go to add, and let's add a backdrop. Now this is a difficult thing to pull off right, but let's create a pretty large backdrop like this. This is similar to like what photo studios do. Okay, we do have a backdrop now, and as you can see, it kind of is in the middle of the phone, so holding the shift key, let's just kind of move it away and up, because we want to be closer to the ground. It's just gonna look way better that way. All right, we have a backdrop, we have a phone. So before we get to the personalization part, which is I think the most important thing, let's grab all the parts of that phone. So basically everything except for the backdrop and the light, and group them. So Control G or Command G, and I'm gonna call this phone. Okay, now reset the view again like this, and you can zoom in or out a tiny bit. If it doesn't work quite well, you can increase the backdrop size slightly, and then simply move the phone. But obviously no phone looks good in this sort of flat perspective, because for that you don't really need much. So make sure this entire group is selected and go to rotation, and you have X, Y, and Z. So basically see what adding 10 points to every one of those values does. And you want the phone to be rotated slightly in every direction. Just make sure to find a spot where the light looks good. Because here the light is just basically going directly onto the phone, but then you can drag the light and move it, or you can remove the light and just kind of add a new one that you can easier control. So let's add a directional light right here, and then I'm gonna kind of bring it up to the side like this. And now you can play with the intensity of the light, so you can decrease it so it's not as bright. Just find a spot where it looks good. You can blur the light, and it actually then affects the shadows cast by the device a little bit. So this is the intensity. All right, and now we see that also we have ourselves the shadow from the backdrop like this. When this is what we want a little bit of a shadow. So now you can still play around rotating the device a little and figuring out what you can do over here.
And then you can play with the reflectivity of the glass panel or the opacity of it here on the right side, just to make sure that the device looks good. And then you can go into the preview mode and figure out the best angle by holding the Alt key and then clicking your mouse and then rotating it. What's the angle that would work best for your presentation? And then you go to export, go to image, pick a JPEG or a PNG and kind of just export it to Drive. But this is still not really personal. So let's make it personal by changing the color. So I'm gonna pick the backdrop, and remember how we picked our hero color for our junior designer to be orange kind of yellow hue. So I'm just gonna do this first. So picking this orange, and it's already looking a lot better because of that background, but that's not all, because we want the phone to also have a little bit of that. So I'm just gonna rename the Boolean group to be the phone body, and I'm gonna place the color on top of it and pick ourselves some nice color. Generally, we want a color that's lighter than the background, kind of like this. So when the color is picked, go to the opacity and then drop it slightly. So maybe 90% like this. Now go to the phone body and see what happens if you place this on top, but then you can use a different blending mode. So you can either multiply it, screen it, which is probably what most people want, but then see what happens if you add 100% here, or you can overlay it. And in this case, you might have to modify the color for this to work. So I'm just making a lighter one, but you can also change this one to a lighter one already in the materials, and then play around with a darker color like this. Okay, and then you can keep the buttons to be black because it kind of matches this aesthetic, but you can still also modify them if you prefer. So it's all up to you what you're gonna do with this. You can then tilt the phone in other directions, maybe like this, and then just go into the playing mode and find the best angle in which you can put something inside those mockups. And of course, there's a lot of back and forth here, so you can still find a better color, maybe a more vibrant orange, just a little bit lighter. And then maybe for the backdrop, we want a more vibrant orange as well. Or maybe we want a blue. And then for the phone itself, maybe we want a blue. Just remember that the phone has to be visible on that background. So just pick an option that is gonna work. And you can move the lights, you can move the shadows. What you can also do is grab that phone, duplicate it, so copy and paste, and then drag one of them to the side like this, and then drag it up, and maybe rotate it slightly towards this direction, and rotate this one towards this direction, and move it away. And now you have two phones. So you can show two different screens, for example. So really, this is all a potential playground for you to explore and to have fun and to create your unique style, because this is the whole point of it, that this style has to be yours. Your color, your way of using the roundness, or your way of using the colors themselves. So I'm just gonna copy the color because I kind of like the orange one. It also fits our avatar. So just rotate this a little bit more, and you can just kind of figure out where to best place those phones. Okay, and then you can use some other software to add your screens on top of them and transform. You can use Spline for that too, but I realized it's actually better to use some different software because you don't want too much of that lightning effect on your phone screens. You want them to be pretty crisp and clear. So you can use Photoshop, you can use Pixelmator to add the screens in there. You can use anything you want and just have a nice set of mockups like these.
And here we are, and I hope you can see that those results look both better and a lot more original right now. Of course, you don't necessarily need to do 3D, you can do 2D mockups that also match your style, but whatever you do, it's really good when all your projects and all your project presentations are instantly recognizable and consistent with each other. You can use a background color that matches the color of the apps that are inside the phones, but still, if the presentation and the mockups themselves are consistent and there is some little element or quirk or something that's inherently yours, then yeah, it's just kind of gonna look like a complete package, and that's what you want to show yourself as. In the end, you want a style that says, yes, this is mine and I'm really proud of my work. That way, you're definitely gonna have a beautiful day.